When I was 12, I remember an evening that still sends shivers down my spine. My younger sister Lily, who was 8 at the time, and I were home alone. It was a stormy winter night around 8:30 p.m. We were in the living room, which was adjacent to the main entrance, engrossed in a board game. The living room had a large window next to the door, and in our distraction, we hadn't noticed the blinds were still open. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell pierced the sound of the howling wind, followed by a persistent knocking. I initially thought it was our parents coming home early, but then I realized they would usually enter through the garage. Approaching the door, I felt a sense of unease, wondering why they hadn't used their keys. Peering out, I expected to see our parents' car in the driveway, but it was empty. A sense of apprehension gripped me. The knocking continued, and then a man's voice, unfamiliar and gruff, called out from the other side. "Hey there, would you kids like to buy some candy?" His tone was oddly cheerful for such a dreary night. Confused and increasingly scared, I tiptoed to the side window to see who it was. The sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. Standing there in the pouring rain was an older man, probably in his late 50s. He was soaked to the bone, and there was no sign of any candy with him. I realized with horror that I needed to check if the front door was locked, without alerting the man of my presence. My heart pounded as I turned the locks quietly, praying he hadn't heard me. He kept knocking, now talking about various types of candy, while I contemplated calling the police. But then a terrifying thought struck me. The blinds in the living room were wide open, with Lily still visible, playing on the floor. I acted swiftly, turning off the lights to make it harder for the man to see inside. Rushing back to the living room, I pulled the blinds closed, ensuring the man saw me doing so, hoping it would deter him. I moved through the house like a shadow, checking every lock and closing every blind. Then, with as much calm as I could muster, I told Lily we were going to play a game in the large walk-in closet in the guest room. I didn't explain the real reason. I didn't want to frighten her. For reasons I still can't explain, I didn't call the police or inform our parents about the incident. Instead, I sat in the darkened hallway, my ears straining for any sound of departure. It felt like hours before the man finally left. To this day, the memory of that night haunts me, a stark reminder of what could have happened if things had gone differently, and the ever-present fear of what might lurk outside an unlocked door. It's been nearly a decade since I moved into this old Victorian house, built in 1910. Nestled on a quiet street, it's a charming single-family home resting on a sturdy foundation of stone. My sister Emma and I always found its creaks and whispers enchanting, but one incident stands out, forever etched in my memory. This happened to me about 8 years ago. Back then, my friends and I had this little rock band. We were into English rock, but with a twist of folk music. Our jam sessions were confined to Sunday afternoons in the spacious yet somewhat eerie attic of my house. As the autumn days began to shorten, we wrapped up one of our longer sessions. The plan was to continue our music discussion at Dan's place. I gave my car keys to Alex for loading the gear, and everyone left, navigating through the narrow attic stairs, down the corridor, and eventually out the front door. I was about to follow when I realized I had left my jacket with my phone in the pocket. It was lying on an old armchair near where we practiced. As I made my way back through the maze-like attic, cluttered with antique furniture and old trunks, something caught my eye, a fleeting shadow just at the edge of my vision. I remembered my grandma's advice about spirits. If you feel uneasy, either say a prayer or boldly confront it. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, I chose confrontation, muttering a challenge under my breath as I briskly made my way back to the stairs. I quickly grabbed my jacket, feeling a chill run down my spine. I didn't dare look back as I switched off the lights, plunging the attic into darkness. I hurried down the stairs, the only light coming from the street lamps outside, casting long shadows through the windows. As I stepped out, closing the heavy front door with a thud, I still felt a strange presence. I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was all in my head. I jogged down the path to where my friends waited in my car, parked under the flickering streetlight. Climbing into the driver's seat, I laughed off my earlier fear, but as I was about to start the car, Alex turned to me with a puzzled look and said, "Hey, isn't your cousin joining us? I thought I saw him following you down." I froze. "No, he's out of town this weekend," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Why do you ask?" "Well, who was that behind you when you left the house?" Alex asked, his eyes wide with confusion and a hint of fear. In that moment, a chill colder than the night air swept through the car, leaving us in stunned silence. It was a chilly October morning in rural Maine, and I, Ellie, was alone at home, preparing for my university lecture at 10 a.m. As I drew the curtains to welcome the autumn sun, a strange sight caught my eye. There was a man, probably in his early 40s, casually strolling across our property. He wore a fedora and moved with an unsettling ease. Our land slopes down into a wooded area, offering a breathtaking view, especially during fall. At first, I assumed he might be someone my parents had hired for the ongoing barn restoration. Feeling uneasy, I watched as he disappeared around the corner of the house. I hurried upstairs for a better view. From there, I could see him ambling around our driveway, examining our home with an odd curiosity. Concerned, I called my dad to check if we were expecting anyone. He was as clueless as I was and promised to check with my mum before getting back to me. Meanwhile, I noticed an oddity: the man's vehicle. It was an old grey Toyota, conspicuously missing its license plates, parked right by our porch. I then remembered our recently installed security system. Without hesitation, I activated it, knowing it would alert the police if there was an attempted break-in. Still, something felt off. Why hadn't this man tried to ring the bell or knock? My dad called back shortly, confirming my fear. No one had been hired to come over. His advice was clear and urgent: call the local police. After ensuring all possible entry points upstairs were secured, I dialed our local police station. The response was frustratingly nonchalant. They directed me to their non-emergency number, which, to my dismay, led to an automated message. Feeling a mix of irritation and fear, I dialed 911. The operator, while thorough in gathering details about the man's appearance, didn't seem to grasp the urgency. I was a young woman alone with a mysterious man lurking around, and yet the response was painfully slow. I requested to stay on the line with the operator. Peering out the window, I saw the man now sitting in his car, apparently engaged in a loud conversation or perhaps listening to a radio show. Suddenly the call dropped. Confused and increasingly scared, my heart skipped a beat when an unknown number called my phone. Expecting the operator, I answered, only to be met with heavy, unnerving breathing. I hung up immediately, my heart racing, and redialed 911. This time the operator was more aware of my situation and assured me that help was on the way. It had been almost 20 minutes, and the man was still there. It was baffling, given our small town's usually prompt police response. Just as the police arrived, the man began to leave. They stopped him, questioned him, and then approached me with a flyer. It claimed he was a landscaper with an appointment. Relief mixed with frustration washed over me, but something didn't add up. I called my mum, relaying what the officer had said. Her response chilled me to the bone. "Ellie, we never hired a landscaper." Realizing the gravity of the situation, the officer called for backup. It turned out the man was neither a landscaper nor someone with good intentions. His deception and my prompt action had averted a potentially dangerous situation. This harrowing experience was a harsh reminder to always trust my instincts and prioritize my safety. I am Emma, a single mother living in a quaint coastal town, working remotely as a graphic designer. My world revolves around my 4-year-old son, Jamie, a precocious child with an extraordinary vocabulary for his age. Jamie's early speech development and limited interaction with children. His own age, given my work-from-home situation, and his absence from daycare have shaped his unique way of communicating. Jamie's imagination is boundless, often leading him to say things that seem beyond his years, occasionally veering into the eerie. I've always had a fascination with the paranormal, which perhaps makes me more sensitive to his words. However, one incident stands out, profoundly unsettling and utterly inexplicable. Our small apartment was always lively, filled with Jamie's laughter and endless stories. One evening, as I sorted laundry in his room, Jamie played with a bunch of wire hangers. He loved pretending they were various tools and machines, his favorite being the cranes at the nearby docks. As I folded his clothes, Jamie, perched on his bed, began attaching hangers to the bedpost. It was then he muttered, almost nonchalantly, "The captain made me do this too." I froze, my hands gripping a shirt tightly. "The captain?" I asked cautiously. Jamie nodded, continuing his play. "Yeah, back when I was an old sailor. He was my son, but a cruel man. He scared me. We lived together when I got old, and he was mean, hurt me a lot." His words flowed as if reciting a well-known story. "Then I died, and now I'm here with you." His casual demeanor didn't wane, but my heart raced. Jamie had never been exposed to the concept of death or violence. Our home was a haven from the harsher realities of life. Then his expression turned serious, and he looked directly at me. "The captain visits me at night here too, tries to hurt me. But you, Mum, you scare him away." My mind reeled. Jamie had always been plagued by night terrors. Since infancy, he would awake, crying in a distinct, gut-wrenching manner, very different from his usual cries. He'd thrash in his bed, muscles rigid, contorting his body in extreme ways. Then suddenly calm would wash over him, and he'd return to peaceful sleep. I've always been the one to rush to his side, trying to soothe him, but to no avail. In the mornings, he'd have no memory of these episodes. I'd attributed these to the typical developmental process, never connecting them to anything more sinister. But now, with Jamie's narrative about the captain and my role in protecting him, I couldn't shake the chilling possibility that there was more to these night terrors. Could his young mind be processing something deeper, something from a past life, or was it just a coincidental creation of an active, imaginative child? As a mother, it's a mystery that haunts me, a story that intertwines the innocence of childhood with the shadows of something inexplicable, leaving me to wonder about the unseen forces that might be at play in my son's life.